My name is Clara Henderson, and on the morning of my 30th birthday, I woke up with a mix of quiet sadness and reluctant hope. 30 was supposed to be a milestone, a moment of celebration. But in my small apartment in Asheville, North Carolina, the silence of estranged parents felt heavier than any birthday balloons or candles could ever lift. It had been nearly 2 years since I had last spoken to Robert and Elaine Henderson, my parents. The reasons were layered and complicated: their reckless financial schemes, their obsession with appearances, and their constant disdain for my husband, Daniel, a skilled but modest car mechanic. To them, Daniel wasn't good enough for their daughter. To me, he was everything: solid, honest, the kind of man who fixed what was broken not just in engines, but in life. That morning, Daniel had surprised me with breakfast in bed. Pancakes shaped like hearts, though slightly lopsided, dripping with maple syrup. Our 6-year-old daughter, Lila, had come charging into the bedroom with a drawing clutched in her small hands, a stick figure version of our family, smiling, beneath a blazing yellow sun. It was perfect in its simplicity. And yet, even as I laughed and kissed them both, there was an ache inside me, an emptiness I couldn't ignore. I still longed, against all reason, for my parents' acceptance. For the phone call that would never come. For the idea that blood really was thicker than resentment. Just after 10 a.m., a sound broke the quiet rhythm of our day. A deep, rumbling engine that seemed out of place on our calm, tree-lined street. I frowned, pulling back the curtain. What I saw made my heart stop. A massive flatbed truck was pulling up in front of our house, gleaming in the late morning sun. On its bed, tied with a ridiculously oversized crimson bow, sat a brand-new pearl-white Jaguar F-Type convertible. The kind of car I had once jokingly said was my dream ride, never imagining I'd ever own something so extravagant. I pressed a hand to my mouth. What in the world? The driver, dressed in a navy uniform, hopped down with a clipboard and a cream envelope. He rang the doorbell, and when Daniel answered, the man's smile widened. "Delivery for Clara Henderson," he announced. I stepped forward, my heart hammering, and nodded mutely. "Congratulations," he said warmly. "Please sign here." My hand shook as I scribbled my signature. The man tipped his cap, handed me the envelope, and walked back toward the truck. I slid my finger under the flap, unfolding a thick piece of ivory cardstock. My mother's looping handwriting leapt off the page. "Our dearest Clara. Not a day goes by that we don't regret the distance between us. You are and always will be our greatest pride. Please accept this gift as a symbol of love, a fresh beginning, and a chance to heal our family. Happy 30th birthday, darling. With all our love. Mom and Dad." The tears came instantly, hot and overwhelming. "This isn't just a car," I whispered, clutching the letter. "It's an apology." Daniel read the note over my shoulder, his brow furrowing. "Clara." "They do love me," I choked out, hardly able to breathe. "They really do." Without hesitation, I dialed my mother's number. She picked up on the first ring. "Did you get it, sweetheart?" Elaine's voice was full of excitement, almost trembling. I don't know what to say," I sobbed. "It's too much. Thank you. Thank you both." My father's voice joined on speaker. "We just want our daughter back, Clara. That's all we've ever wanted. Can we come by tonight? We'll bring champagne, celebrate properly." "Yes," I said, without a moment's pause. "Tonight will be perfect." When I hung up, joy surged through me in dizzying waves. After years of fractured bonds, of disappointment and unspoken hurts, here it was, reconciliation, wrapped in metal and leather and a giant red bow. I ran outside, laughing, and touched the hood of the Jaguar. The sun reflected in its perfect curves. It looked like something from a movie, impossibly glamorous against our modest suburban driveway. Daniel followed, slower. His expression was unreadable, his hands shoved into his pockets. "Clara, this is a $90,000 car. Your parents were drowning in debt last year. How could they?" "Who cares?" I cut him off, waving the concern away. "Maybe they sold property. Maybe an investment came through. For once, can't you just be happy for me?" He forced a smile, but his eyes stayed shadowed. I slid into the driver's seat, inhaling the intoxicating scent of new leather. For the first time in years, I felt whole, seen, loved. But Daniel, my cautious, stubborn Daniel, wasn't celebrating. He was already circling the car like a predator stalking prey. He crouched by the tires, inspected the paintwork, lifted the hood. "Stop it," I called with a playful laugh. "It's brand new. It's perfect. Don't ruin this." "Clara," he said, his voice tight, "just let me check. A machine like this deserves a once-over." I rolled my eyes, but deep down I knew this was who he was, a man who trusted engines more than promises, who had spent his life fixing what others ignored. Minutes passed. Then 20. My joy began to sour into irritation. Finally, Daniel emerged from under the hood, wiping his hands. "Engine looks pristine. But," his eyes narrowed, "there are scratches near the battery terminal. And a wire that doesn't look factory-made." I groaned. "It's probably from delivery prep. You always look for problems." He didn't argue. Instead, he disappeared into the garage and returned with his mechanic's creeper and flashlight. "I'll check underneath," he muttered. "Then I'll relax." I sighed and sank back into the driver's seat, clutching the key fob, ready to prove him wrong. 10 minutes later, when he slid out from beneath the car, his face was ashen, his eyes wide with a terror I had never seen. "Clara," he whispered hoarsely, gripping the side of the car for balance. "Get out. Now. Don't touch anything. Don't even breathe on that ignition." I laughed nervously. "Daniel, you're scaring me." "Clara," he said again, his voice low and urgent, "there's a bomb under this car." For a heartbeat I thought he was joking, some dark mechanic humor meant to startle me back to earth. But Daniel's face wasn't capable of jokes anymore. It was chalk white, the freckles on his nose standing out like constellations against a winter sky, and there was sweat at his temples though the morning was mild. "Clara," he said, each syllable heavy, "don't press the start button. Don't even lean forward. Open the door slowly. Keep your feet where they are. I'm going to take your hand and you're going to step out, gently." My breath snagged. A cold ribbon slid down my spine. Lila's laughter drifted from the living room window, a soft chiming sound, oblivious and perfect, and that's what untied the knot inside my chest. I nodded. Daniel reached in. His palm was warm and calloused and shaking. I let him guide me. One foot, then the other. Gravel clicked under my flats. The air smelled suddenly metallic, sharp, as if the world itself had drawn blood. "Under the rear axle," he whispered. "Black box. Magnets. 2 leads spliced into the loom toward the coil. And a sensor. I think it's keyed to the ignition and movement." The words didn't fit into my life. They belonged to some other woman's story, not to Clara Henderson from Asheville who kept an herb garden on the porch and burned pancakes on Sundays. A bomb. In a gift from my parents. "Show me," I said, though I already believed him. Something in his eyes made lies impossible. He brought the flashlight close to the ground and angled it. I had to kneel to see, palms pressing into the cool driveway. At first there was only shadow and pipes and the strange orderly wilderness of a car's underbelly, then the light hit it, a compact rectangle, matte and neat as a lunchbox, nestled above the axle. A red lead. A single pulse. Then another. A calm little heartbeat that did not belong to anything living. The sound I made wasn't a word. It was a torn seam. Daniel clicked the light off and drew me up fast. "Inside," he breathed. "We get Lila. We move to the end of the block. No running past the car. We cut around the backyard." "My parents," I began, and stopped. The letter had felt like warmth. Now it felt like a slick thing in my pocket, something that might stain. "Later," he said, his jaw locking. "Now we get our girl." I don't remember moving through the house so much as skipping entire frames. One moment I was on the driveway. The next I was in our living room, where sunlight fell through the blinds in brave, normal stripes. Lila sat cross-legged on the rug, building a plastic mansion for a tiny rubber rabbit. She looked up. Her eyes, the same clear blue as Daniel's, went wide with happiness. "Mommy, do you want to see the We're playing a new game, I said, hearing how steady my voice somehow was. Super silent rockets. We're going to Mrs. Klein's garden at the end of the street. Fast as we can. No sound. Can you do it? Lila's spine straightened with purpose. I can be very quiet, she whispered, finger to her lips. Shoes, Daniel said softly. He passed Lila her sneakers, then my slippers, and grabbed the tote that always hung near the door. Wallet, keys, inhaler, a small first aid kit, the 1,000 little tools of ordinary life. He didn't look back toward the driveway. I didn't either. We slipped out the back. The yard smelled of damp soil and rosemary. A mourning dove startled from the fence and cut a grey arc through the sky. I held Lila's hand so tight she squeaked. Too tight, Mommy, she whispered. I loosened my grip, kissed her hair, and tried not to imagine how far a blast wave could reach. We cut behind the neighbor's dogwood, past Mrs. Klein's tomato cages, around a registration of familiar fences that suddenly felt like a labyrinth in a different mythology, one where gods wore Kevlar and brought robots. When we reached the sidewalk a block down, Daniel stopped. He lifted Lila onto his hip, put his other arm around my shoulders, and walked us the last yards like a shield might walk two people it loved. Here, he said when we reached the Klein's front garden. We sit. We breathe. And we call. 911. I asked. The word felt enormous. Not at first. He handed me my phone. The non-emergency line for the city police goes straight to dispatch without jamming the queue. Bomb squad will roll either way. But I want a record that you, Clara, made the call, clear-headed, with names. With names. Robert and Elaine Henderson. The syllables tasted like pennies. I tapped the number I'd saved once after reporting a smashed mailbox. A woman answered on the second ring, her voice steady. Asheville Police Department. How may I direct your... My name is Clara Henderson, I said. I'm at 514 Melrose Lane. A vehicle, a white Jaguar F-Type, was delivered to my house less than an hour ago as a birthday gift from my parents, Robert and Elaine Henderson. My husband, Daniel Carter, a certified mechanic, has identified what appears to be a professionally installed explosive device attached to the vehicle's ignition and a movement sensor. We have evacuated to the end of the block. There is a child. We are safe for the moment. There was a silence that felt brisk, competent. I'm dispatching units and EOD now. Stay on the line. Do not return to the house. Do you see the vehicle from your location? No, I said. We took the backyard route. Good. Officers will establish a perimeter. Keep your phone on you. The sirens began faint and then grew, a swell of sound that filled the valley like weather. In less than 3 minutes, a lifetime, a blink, 2 cruisers slid into place with a kind of choreography I had only ever seen on television. Officers stepped out, voices low and clipped, palms down in that universal sign for calm. Yellow tape unfurled, bright as a warning flower. The neighbors came onto lawns one by one, curiosity first, then fear, then pity. A woman officer with a kind mouth crouched to Lila's height. Hi, sweetheart. My name's Officer Dawson. Do you like stickers? She produced a sheet printed with cartoon badge shapes. Lila's shoulders eased. The officer's eyes flicked up to mine. You did the right thing, she said quietly. All of it. Daniel's pressed against my back. They'll need my statement, he murmured. They'll need mine, I answered. And there's more. I touched the pocket where Elaine's letter rested like a fossil. They called. They said they wanted to come tonight. To celebrate. Officer Dawson guided us toward the shade of a maple where a detective was already speaking to a pair of uniformed officers. He wore a dark blazer over a charcoal shirt, no tie, hair just beginning to silver. His badge read de Ruiz. He had the look of someone who had read the world so many times he no longer expected it to make sense. Ms. Henderson, he said. Mr. Carter. I'm Detective Ruiz. EOD is staged 2 blocks out and rolling. We're going to keep a line back while they send the bot in. Before that, I need your first statements while details are fresh. I told him. The truck, the bow, the envelope with its expensive paper and warm words. The call to my mother, Elaine. My father, Robert, chiming in on speaker. The champagne. The promise of tonight. Ruiz took notes in a small hardcover book with a fountain pen, neat, looping letters that somehow made me trust him more. When I finished, he turned to Daniel. "What did you see?" he asked. Daniel's voice was steady in the way bridges are steady. Box secured to the chassis with magnets. Wiring spliced into coil. Looked like an accelerometer or motion sensor piggybacked. Leads heat shrinked. Whoever did it wasn't sloppy. Red lead. Heartbeat blink. That's not stock, not dealer, not aftermarket for anything legitimate. It looked trained. Ruiz nodded once, as if some private geometry had resolved. Okay. A low electric would join the air, the EOD robot, squat and precise, trundling into view like an insect from the future. A bomb tech in a bulky green suit walked behind it, visor reflecting strips of sky. The neighborhood held its breath. The robot turned up our driveway. It paused near the rear axle where Daniel had directed, its camera eye adjusting, the small articulated arm extending. The lead on my heart, I mean the lead under the car, pulsed, patient as sleep. I thought of Elaine's handwriting. I thought of the way her C looped into the L of Clara, how when I was small she used to draw hearts in the margins of notes for my lunchbox. I thought of Robert standing a half step behind her at recitals and graduations, pride tightening his jaw in that particular way of his. I thought of their last argument with me in a restaurant where water glasses were thick and cold and everything echoed. I thought of debt and humiliation and the slippery hunger that can turn love into arithmetic. The radio on Ruiz's shoulder crackled. A voice came through, filtered, careful. Confirm device attached and armed. Worman-like. Ignition and motion triggers appear active. Beginning disruptor sequence. Lila was coloring a sticker with her fingertip. She looked up at me. Is the robot going to make the car better? It's going to make it safe, I said, and realized I was crying without moving a muscle. There was no boom. There was a hush, a tiny mechanical cough, a hiss. The bomb tech spoke again into the net. First disruptor deployed. Stand by. A minute that lasted longer than entire years past. We have it neutralized, the voice said at last. Repeat. Neutralized. Component removal beginning. Sound returned to the day. Birds remembered how to speak. People remembered how to breathe. Ruiz nodded to us once. You did everything right, he said again, and then added, I'm going to have units expand the perimeter until we're certain there's no secondary. Secondary. I swayed. That was when I saw the silver sedan hesitate at the barricade down the block. It was out of place in the sea of uniforms, unmistakable in its tidy, respectable sameness. The driver rolled down his window, spoke to an officer, gestured toward our house. The passenger leaned forward, her hair a perfect sheet even from this distance. Robert. Elaine. They parked. They got out slowly, the way people do when they intend to be noticed, looking dignified. Elaine carried a pale blue cake box tied with white string. Robert wore the blazer he used to save for Easter. For an instant my body moved on old calibrations, shoulders straightening, mouth arranging itself around a daughter's smile. Then Daniel's hand found mine and anchored me to the ground I actually stood on. Ruiz's gaze followed mine. His expression didn't change, but I watched the temperature behind his eyes drop. Stay here, he said. With your child. He walked to meet them alone, not hurried, not slow, not any adjective at all, just a kind of quiet gravity that pulled bad stories toward their endings. From where I stood I saw Elaine's face arrange itself into shock. I saw Robert's eyebrows lift as if the world had misplaced his reservation. Words passed I could not hear. Ruiz gestured toward the driveway. Elaine's eyes widened further, theatrically, a fraction too much. They had rehearsed this, I thought. They had stood in a kitchen somewhere and practiced their lines. Ruiz led them under the maple into the circle of tape, to where we waited. Elaine came toward me, arms opening, the cake box wobbling slightly. Clara, darling, she breathed. We heard, an officer told us, a bomb? Who would do such a thing? Are you hurt? Is Lila? I stepped back. It was the smallest step, but it was as if I'd moved continents. Elaine stopped. Something flared behind her eyes. Not grief, not fear. Something like affront. "Mrs. Henderson," Detective Ruiz said politely, "I have a few questions. You said on the phone you purchased the vehicle for your daughter." "Yes," Robert answered smoothly. "We wanted it to be a surprise." "Which dealership?" Ruiz asked. "The Jaguar showroom on Merriman," Robert said without hesitation. "We paid, by cashier's check." Ruiz's pen hung in the air. "That's interesting," he said mildly. "Because the VIN we ran isn't attached to a dealer sale. It was purchased in a private cash transaction 3 days ago from a man named Anton Wells. He has a long record for various felonies including possession of explosive precursors. Do you know Mr. Wells?" Robert's face changed slowly, as if he were trying to decide which expression fit the scene. Elaine's grip tightened on the cake box until the string cut pale grooves into her fingers. "I'm sure the dealership handled it," Robert said at last. "We didn't. This is all a terrible." And, Ruiz went on in the same tone, as if reading a grocery list. "A routine financial check shows a new life insurance policy taken out last week on Clara Henderson Carter in the amount of $2.5 million. Beneficiaries listed as Robert and Elaine Henderson. Unusual, given the estrangement you mentioned to your daughter this morning." The sound Elaine made was tiny, like a teacup set too hard on its saucer. Robert's mouth compressed to a fine white line. Lila pressed closer to my leg. Daniel's hand tightened around mine until our bones knocked. The radio crackled again. "Device disarmed and in custody," the bomb tech reported. "Military components. Clean work." The last of the choreography clicked into place. Ruiz's kind, unreadable face became very clear. He nodded once to the nearest pair of officers. Then he turned to my parents, and said, in a voice that contained no adjectives at all, "Robert Henderson. Elaine Henderson. You are under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder." Elaine's mouth fell open on a perfect O. The cake box slid from her hands and thumped against the grass without tipping. Robert stared at the yellow tape as if it had personally disappointed him. "Clara," Elaine said, and the sound of my name in her voice felt like a trick I had finally learned. "Clara, tell them we would never." I looked at her. I thought of the loop of her C. I thought of the letter in my pocket and the light under the car that had pulsed like a borrowed heart. I thought of Lila's rubber rabbit sitting in a half-built plastic palace, waiting for hands that would come back because Daniel had told me to move, because he had known where to look, because love is sometimes a knowledge so precise it saves you. "Lila," I said softly, bending until my forehead touched hers. "The nice officers are going to ask us a few more questions. We're going to be brave and patient. Can you do that?" She nodded. "We're still super silent rockets." "We're the quietest rockets," I said. And as they cuffed Robert and Elaine with professional gentleness, as the neighbors pretended not to watch and the sirens softened and the robot trundled away, I felt something in my chest loosen, not victory, not joy. Something like the untying of a knot that had held a kite too close to the ground for years. The kite rose. The string burned my fingers. I didn't let go. The flashing lights eventually dimmed, but the aftermath lingered like smoke in the lungs. My parents were taken in separate squad cars, their faces pressed into shadow behind the glass. Elaine still tried to meet my eyes as the vehicle pulled away, mouthing words I couldn't quite hear. Robert kept his gaze fixed forward, as if dignity could erase chains. Detective Ruiz asked me, Daniel, and little Lila to come down to the precinct for formal statements. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to crawl into bed with my daughter and pretend the world outside didn't exist. But Ruiz's tone was gentle and immovable. "The sooner we do this, Ms. Henderson, the stronger the record becomes." Daniel nodded. "We'll go." At the station, they led us into a quiet interview room with beige walls and a humming fluorescent light that flickered at odd intervals. Lila curled up on a chair with crayons an officer had scavenged from a desk drawer. Daniel sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, while I faced Ruiz across the table. He opened a folder, slid the ivory envelope into a plastic sleeve, and placed it in front of me. "This is the note you received." I nodded, throat dry. My mother's handwriting. I'd swear it. Ruiz tapped the sleeve with his pen. It will be tested for prints and fibers. Sometimes the smallest smudge tells the loudest story. I closed my eyes. The words in that letter had carried me higher than any gift ever had. They had been a lullaby, a balm. Now they were evidence. Clara, Ruiz said softly, walk me through your history with your parents. Start at the beginning. Why the estrangement? The question cut deep. I told him about the arguments, their disdain for Daniel's work, their obsession with appearances, the reckless business loans that had collapsed into debt. I told him about the night 2 years ago when my father called me a fool for marrying beneath myself and my mother cried as if my life had personally insulted hers. After that night, I whispered, I stopped answering calls. They stopped visiting. They sent one Christmas card. That was it. Until today. Ruiz scribbled. And you're certain the car was purchased by them? Yes. They said so themselves. My father even mentioned a cashier's check. But you already know that's a lie. His eyes flicked up. Yes. Mr. Wells has confessed to selling the Jaguar for cash. He denies knowledge of the bomb, claims he only sourced the vehicle. But his story doesn't hold. He's being held for questioning. A tremor rippled through me. So this is real. All of it. Very real, Ruiz said. And very deliberate. I pressed my palms flat against the table, feeling the cold surface steady me. When my turn ended, Daniel spoke. His words were mechanical but precise, a map of wires and circuits and certainty. Ruiz listened intently, nodding. Your expertise may well be the reason your wife and daughter are alive, he said at last. Daniel only shrugged. I just did what I always do. Look closely. Ruiz closed the folder. You'll both need protection for a while. Until we know whether your parents acted alone or had help, we can't rule out accomplices. The word accomplices echoed like a shout. My parents. Accomplices. It made them sound like characters from a heist movie, not the people who'd once tucked me into bed. We left the station past midnight. Asheville was quiet, the streets washed with rain. Daniel drove our old Subaru, the engine rattling like an old friend. Lila slept in the back seat, her hair a golden tangle. I stared out the window, my reflection ghosting over neon signs. How do I ever live with this? I whispered. Daniel's hand found mine on the console. By remembering what's real. The next morning, the story had already spread. Neighbors whispered on lawns, news vans lingered at the edges of the street. A reporter shoved a microphone toward me as we returned from the station. Ms. Henderson, did your parents really try to kill you? Daniel stepped between us, voice iron. No comment. He guided me and Lila inside. But inside wasn't safe either. Every photograph, every relic of my childhood suddenly felt poisoned. The smiling faces on the walls weren't my family anymore. They were suspects. Accomplices. A knock came at the door that evening. I froze. Daniel checked the peephole, then relaxed. Detective Ruiz. He stepped inside, removing his hat. We've confirmed the insurance policy. It was taken out with falsified documents. Your parents forged your signature. They stood to gain millions. My stomach twisted. So it really was just money. Money and resentment, Ruiz said. A powerful mix. Daniel asked the question I couldn't. What happens now? Your parents will be arraigned. The DA is preparing attempted murder charges, conspiracy, insurance fraud. It's going to be a long process. He hesitated. And Ms. Henderson, one more thing, did your parents ever mention contacts in Charlotte? We found phone records. Repeated calls to a burner registered there. I shook my head slowly. No. But I'm not surprised. They always had friends I didn't know about. Business partners. Deals behind closed doors. Ruiz's gaze lingered on me, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Then he stood. Stay close to your husband. Don't go anywhere alone. If you see anything unusual, anyone unusual, call me immediately. When he left, Daniel and I sat in silence. Lila was asleep upstairs, the steady rhythm of her breathing a fragile anchor. I whispered into the dark, "They would have killed me, Daniel. Their own daughter. Just snuffed me out." His grip on my hand was fierce. "But they didn't. Because we saw it. Because we fought. And because we don't need their love to survive." I laid my head on his shoulder, the weight of his words pressing into me. But even as I tried to believe them, another voice whispered, "Blood always leaves stains, even when you scrub the floor clean." The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm of hearings, affidavits, and depositions. Asheville, my quiet little city, had become the stage for a scandal that felt too twisted even for late-night crime shows. Every headline carried my name. DA. Parents charged in attempted murder of daughter with car bomb. Family betrayal in Asheville. Jaguar with explosive device. Clara Henderson survives parents' deadly birthday gift. The first time I saw my parents again was at the arraignment. They were led into the courtroom in orange jumpsuits, wrists cuffed, expressions carefully arranged. Elaine wore the same faint, trembling smile she had once used when scolding me in public, as though pretending gentleness could erase the cruelty beneath. Robert kept his chin high, eyes cold and appraising. I sat in the front row, Daniel's hand in mine, Lila with a sitter at home. My parents' eyes found me immediately. Elaine mouthed "darling." Robert shook his head with theatrical disbelief, as though I were the traitor here, not them. The judge read the charges: attempted first-degree murder, conspiracy, possession of explosive materials, insurance fraud. Each word landed like a hammer against bone. Their lawyer, a sharp man in a tailored suit, argued that Robert and Elaine had been framed, that the car was tampered with after they purchased it. That the insurance policy was a precaution misunderstood. That their daughter had misinterpreted everything. But Ruiz's testimony, Daniel's expertise, and the forensic evidence from the bomb dismantled those claims piece by piece. Photographs of the black box under the Jaguar were displayed on screens, the blinking red LED forever frozen. Technical reports confirmed the wiring wasn't amateur. Whoever installed it knew what they were doing. When the prosecutor revealed the timeline, the private cash purchase, the forged insurance documents, the string of calls to a burner phone in Charlotte, I felt the courtroom air shift. Gasps whispered from the gallery. For the first time, Robert's mask slipped. His mouth tightened, his jaw twitching. Elaine's eyes welled with tears, but not the kind I recognized from my childhood. These were the tears of a performance unraveling. The trial stretched for months. Reporters hounded our street, cameras lurking at the edge of the yellowed lawns. Neighbors avoided eye contact, unsure whether to offer sympathy or suspicion. Some whispered that maybe I had exaggerated, that maybe the bomb wasn't real. But then the prosecution revealed the bomb squad's final report: military-grade components, sourced from a supplier linked to black market networks. I remember the courtroom silence as those words echoed. My stomach knotted. Not only had my parents wanted me gone, but they had reached into shadows I had never known they touched. Cross-examination brought its own horrors. Elaine's lawyer painted me as an emotional daughter desperate for attention, suggesting I had planted doubts in Daniel's head. He held up the ivory letter in a plastic sleeve and asked if perhaps I had written it myself. "Look at the handwriting," I said evenly. "You'll find 20 years of my mother's grocery lists match it perfectly." The jury watched, stone-faced. Robert testified last. He spoke calmly, eloquently, insisting the car was a pure gesture of love, that they had been planning reconciliation for months. His voice was strong, but I recognized the cadence, the same rehearsed speeches he once gave investors before bankruptcies swallowed everything. The prosecutor's final question cut through. "Mr. Henderson, can you explain why, if this was a gift of reconciliation, you and your wife took out a $2.5 million life insurance policy on your daughter just 7 days prior?" For the first time, Robert faltered. His jaw worked soundlessly. The silence stretched, heavy as stone. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they filed back into the courtroom, my pulse roared in my ears. Daniel squeezed my hand. I stared at the polished wood of the bench, afraid to look at anything else. On the charge of attempted first-degree murder, we find the defendants guilty. On the charge of conspiracy, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. Each word fell like thunder. Elaine's shoulders shook. Robert stared straight ahead, lips pressed into a thin white line. The judge's gavel came down. Robert and Elaine Henderson, you are hereby sentenced to 30 years to life in the North Carolina Department of Corrections. The courtroom erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. I felt nothing at first. Not triumph. Not relief. Just emptiness, as though my veins had been drained of sound. It was Daniel's whisper that reached me. You're safe now. We're safe. Only then did the tears come, not for the parents who had tried to kill me, but for the girl I once was, who had spent decades believing their love might one day be enough. Life after betrayal doesn't snap back like a rubber band. It reshapes slowly, unevenly, like metal hammered too thin. For months, I woke to nightmares. The blink of a red light in the dark, the sound of a flatbed truck outside, my mother's voice cooing darling. Daniel held me through them, patient and steady. Lila, resilient as children are, bounced back fastest. She told her friends at school that Daddy's robot friend saved Mommy's birthday car. The innocence of her version was a shield I cherished. Detective Ruiz visited once more before closing the file. It's rare, he said, to see a case so airtight. You were lucky, Ms. Henderson. Not just in surviving, but in having someone like your husband who trusted his instincts. I glanced at Daniel, grease still under his fingernails from a day at the garage. My throat tightened with gratitude. The Jaguar was impounded, stripped for evidence. I never saw it again. Sometimes, though, I still dream of its white curve in the driveway, perfect as a jewel, deadly as a serpent. But dreams fade. And mornings come. On my 31st birthday, Daniel and Lila surprised me with pancakes again, this time perfectly round, not lopsided. No bows, no trucks, no letters. Just syrup and laughter and the warmth of a family that had chosen me every day, without conditions. That was the only gift I ever needed.